like to welcome you to the first webinar being hosted by Banknotes, minted by Paid. My name is Ian Leslie. I'm editor-in-chief of Banknotes. We are a trade website media website that reports on e-commerce, retail, and the creator economy. We're looking forward to host a number of webinars over the coming months, just dealing with different segments of e-commerce and retail, technology, etc. And right now we do have two guests, but right now just one joins us, Mason Lin. He's founder of the checkout company called Pockyt. And in a second, I will let Mason introduce himself. This webinar is going to be recorded and posted on banknotes.co. So if there's anything you miss, feel free to just return to banknotes.co and we will post the content there in about 24 hours. So for now, Mason, if you just take a second to introduce yourself, and I will take down this shared screen.
Sure, awesome. I think Osa is also here, but I can kick it off. Mason, okay. Co-founder, CEO for Pockyt. Personally, first generation immigrant, came to the state when I was 13. This is actually my third fintech startup. Previous two I founded in China. When I went back 2013, 2014, just happened to call it that, what is so-called cashless revolution. Both of them are in fintech. Both of them are lending tech, B2B. This is 5.5 years journey for us in the United States.
Okay, awesome. And I don't see Osan. Do you? Osa, are you on?
He's back on.
I'm not seeing him.
I can see him from the people list.
Oh, okay, that's weird. Okay, well, hopefully he'll get the right link going. Okay, well, cool. Thanks for that introduction. Mason, so yeah, let's get started. Few questions that I wanted to lay out, and then we can just kind of have a conversation. No real presentation here, but why did you get into the checkout space? What was the problem you felt? Oh, Os is on. What are we doing, man?
Hey there. How's it going?
Hey, good. Welcome. Mason just introduced himself, so Os, if you want to take an opportunity to introduce yourself, that'd be great, and introduce Parrot.
Definitely. Hey there. I'm Osa, CEO and founder of Parrot. Parrot is a new form of checkout that helps consumers chat and pay at the businesses they love. We're very excited to be on the webinar today and speak to everyone here.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. So with those two introductions, I guess, Mason, if you want to take this first. So why did you get into the checkout space? And I guess primarily, what was the problem you felt needed disrupting or needed solving?
Yeah, sure. So I think me getting into checkout just sort of happened naturally. When I sold my second company in China, I thought it could be a great idea to import some of those payment methods that we were familiar with back in China to the United States. And to your questions about the gap in the market, right? Obviously, especially as someone who frequently travel between borders, you realize that in the West, or predominantly United States, it's mostly credit card infrastructure. Merchants are, typically, or definitely 5.5 years ago, the only payment type that they accept is credit cards. But on the flip side, the consumer base, say places in China, they have completely transitioned to mobile wallet payments. You see Alipay, WeChat Pay of the world. So I guess it happened naturally, and we saw a tremendous amount of opportunity if we can actually facilitate Western retailers to directly accept Chinese payments. But obviously, since then, we support a lot more digital wallet payments globally, helping merchants to seamlessly connect with their consumer base, globally. Even to today, I think the gap for international payments is still huge. Not only that, merchants get to pay a lot higher fees, roughly about 4.5 to 5%. If you factor in international interchanges and potential fraud and chargeback issues in the space. But with some of the wallets that we support, we are slashing the fees in over half, and making it super easy for a merchant to sell globally, but at the same time, a lot easier for the consumers to make their purchases.
Oh, so how about you? You're in a little bit different space as opposed to the mobile wallet. It's more on the SMS side. So talk a little bit about that. What you were looking to disrupt there.
Yeah, no, very, very similar. One experience that I had, when I went back to Nigeria, where I grew up initially, was I had an experience where I was trying to buy something from a merchant who was really far away. And my cousin said, you can just text the merchant. They can collect your payment directly over text, and then they can bring you the thing you want. You don't have to actually, go all the way over there. And so what I realized was that outside the US, that, most countries, whether it's in Kenya or the case of M-Pesa or WeChat in the case of some Asian countries, folks had figured out how to let consumers chat and pay with merchants in a seamless way. And my background was I came from MailChimp, and at MailChimp, I had seen the value of being able to have a relationship with the consumer as a merchant. And so we really focused on and continue to focus on helping merchants not only collect someone's phone number so they can check them out very quickly on their website, but more importantly, let the merchant reach out to the person and remind them of additional things they need to buy, and let that consumer just say, yes, I want it, or apply with a thumbs up to complete that transaction. And we're excited about that because we think, the US is still quite behind a lot of, the developing world, so to speak. But the real future, I think, in the US will be, really catered to trying to learn from those other countries and figure out how to do payments right, not just in terms of wallets, but in terms of relationships and engagement with consumers after they bought the first time.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I mean, Mason, you know, were on a panel like right after Cyber Week sale stuff, and I think I said Salesforce had reported it was the first year, at least domestically, a decline in credit card purchases as a share of revenue or a share of purchases, and that mobile wallets are on the uptick. So obviously, like that's a little bit of a trend in the States, and something that there's obviously runway there. I guess you guys both touched on it, and something I want to continue to touch on because I think it's such a unique perspective, and something I don't hear a lot about is that Mason, from the Asian perspective, Osa, having experience in the African continent. What trends are you seeing there? And you guys already touched on them a little bit, but what trends are you seeing that could potentially come over to North America? And then I guess additionally, those are both trends you guys are mentioning in terms of SMS and mobile wallet as opposed to credit card could potentially like raise some flags on the security side for or privacy side for North American consumers. But do you think there's going to be appetite to adopt like, you know, something that's always persistent in terms of a mobile wallet, or something that's like not tied to, so you know, something that's tied to my cell that, you know, there's a larger kind of database that has all my info in terms of SMS side. So whoever wants to touch on that, I guess, what are the international trends that could come over, and do you think there's appetite in North America for them?
Mason, I'll let you kick it off. I'd love to hear what you're thinking from the Asian perspective.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I first started off with my first startup, 2013, it was just at the beginning, the dawn, when the Chinese consumers have transitioned to QR code wallets, right? Alipay, WeChat Pay of the world. Uh, Actually, if you look at it holistically, it's the first place, even though the Chinese did not invent the QR, but they actually leverage QR to the best extent, apply it to both online checkout and in-store checkout through the scan of QR code. And since then, it just drastically changed not only how people transact, but how the consumers interact with the merchants, with the business that they love to purchase. Like exactly like Osa mentioned earlier, there are a lot of ways that consumers now increasingly demand in terms of how they prefer to transact, not having the checkout to solely be dictated by the merchant. So I think one of the trends that we seen in this space is that now when it comes to experience, the user experience from checkout, both merchants experience and the user experiences are being valued equally. So I think with that said, specifically, from our space, the adoptions of QR has been huge. It's widely accepted in a lot of the countries in Asia, a lot of those developing countries. Also mentioned M-Pesa also happen to be one of our partners that we are enabling some of the merchants to directly accept M-Pesas of the world. So I guess the rise of QR code-based digital wallets, along the side with Apple and Google Pay, Samsung Pay, is rapidly on the increasing. And then from the merchant's perspective, I think the trend is also not only to adopt them, but increasingly they be looking for a lot of the value-added services, because it's essentially digitizing their in-store payments. What come out of that acceptance of those digital wallets is that they get to do a lot more, not only accepting payments, but having a better way to interact with your consumer base. So I think generally, the trend is that from our perspective, interactions beyond payment is what we see in the market.
Wow, that's big. I think similarly for me, that's something we're seeing as a trend, at least for me, visiting Nigeria, right? Visiting countries where I have families, seeing that folks are not just thinking about checkout as something that happens one time in a store where you swipe a credit card, but they're really thinking about, to Mason's point, how do I, over the lifetime of my relationship with this customer, give them a really personal experience, especially when the consumer really thinks of themselves first, right? They're not beholden to the kinds of payments I want to accept. So I think for a lot of merchants we're talking to here in the US, they're seeing things like QR codes kind of, really take off in America for the first time because of COVID. And they're now thinking about, well, what else can I do that I can really, help drive value for my business over time. And we think one of those interesting trends is merchants in the US starting to think about, how do I connect with people directly over text? How do I get them to engage with me there, as opposed to just kind of sending them spam, right? Sending them marketing messages. I think a lot of folks outside America have figured that out. They figured out how to really create a direct relationship between a merchant and a consumer. And I think here in the US, we'll have to kind of learn from that trend over the next 5 years.
Yeah, it's interesting also, and something also I've talked about is like how internationally there's still a big audience for Nokia flip phones, right? How that's still, and it's almost a desire to, in some countries it's an economics thing, but in North America there is an emerging desire to dumb down the technology, that people want a phone that doesn't have everything. So how are we going to communicate with those people and allow them to check out even on those phones? So is it SMS? Is it, a mobile wallet? Is it QR code? Is it, a phone that doesn't have all the bells and whistles of this, but is like, we're seeing more and more flip phones. We're seeing more and more, and again, like I said, the audience and the appetite for, Nokia overseas. And I think like both of your technologies kind of fit into that space well, because it's not only allowing checkout across those quote unquote dumber devices, but allowing for relationship and customer merchant relationship across those devices. Do you think we'll ever, I've seen people carry two phones in the States, one like a dumb flip phone and one, the smartphone, obviously in Asia. I mean, I've people, what is it? It's like 3.5 phones or mobile devices per person in Asia. It's crazy. But, do you think there'll be that appetite for it's almost like a lesser touch, right? It's not the website. It's not the, Mason, you mentioned QR codes. Also SMS. It's almost like, I've talked a lot about how the experience may start to occur more and more off of the own.com. Is that where you think it's headed?
Go ahead, Osa.
Yeah, no, I think what's interesting for me in the US is I think there are a lot of businesses who assume that I'm going to go back to their website just because, they have one and they spend a lot of money, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars kind of keeping their website up to date and continue to improve it. But for me, think of allbirds.com. I've only been to the Allbirds website once in my life, maybe twice, but I bought like 4 or 5 pairs of Allbirds, right? And so for me, I think what's interesting about that is when I walk into an Allbirds store in San Francisco, they have no idea that I've been to their website. And when I go to the website, they don't know I've been to a physical store. So I think what's really interesting about what's happening in America, and I think the phone is an interesting, question, right? I don't know if the phone is the answer, but it's an interesting opportunity because my phone is always with me. It's always in my pocket. But what's interesting is when I go to the website or when I go to the store or elsewhere, Allbirds has no idea who I am. Like they almost don't care who I am. It's almost as if it's irrelevant. But I think there's an opportunity for a lot of American merchants to start to ask themselves a question like, how do you make sure that when someone comes into your store or goes to your website, you can at least follow them, not in terms of tracking, but allow them to check in some kind of way. And I don't think it's a technology question. I think it's more just a question of like how merchants think about, well, what is the purpose of the phone? How do I have a relationship with someone? And I think as we dumb things down, a lot of these merchants need to start asking themselves, how do I just directly talk to OSA, right? Maybe it's once a month, once a week, once a quarter. Maybe it's automated, but maybe it's not, especially if OSA is a VIP who's buying 4 or 5 pairs of Allbirds over a 14-month period. I really should have a relationship with him that's organic. I think outside the US, we're seeing folks sort of use the phone as that way to connect with people directly and say, I'm going to text this customer in a very high touch way. But I think here in the US, we're still counting on the website being something people come back to. And I think more and more often people don't go back to the website. Yeah. They might buy once and never go back to that site again.
I think you're spot on. I think like this is probably a pretty bad metaphor, but like I'm a trading card buff, and like I know like I'm big into soccer cards, and I'm on Twitter, and there's a lot of people who buy and sell trading cards on Twitter. So like if I pull something out of a pack that's like a player from Brazil, well, I know the guy on Twitter who collects players from Brazil, so I'm just going to DM him directly and be like, hey, got this great card, are you interested? And I think that's like sort of the one-to-one relationship that's going to have to emerge. Mason, any thoughts on just like kind of almost low-teching it down a little bit? And I mean, it's for obviously what you built is extremely high tech, but making it easier for the customer, right? And not having to send them to the .com.
Yeah, I actually have nothing different compared to OSA. Just to double click, I mean, completely agree with what OSA you mentioned about, sort of tying back with what we've been discussing about the trend. At the end of the day, I think business is gonna get smarter, right? Business want to stay connected with their consumers. Same thing for the consumers. They don't want to go through the same process if they can save additional 5 seconds, at the browsing, process or at the checkout phase. So I think the stuff that we are doing, and maybe take a step back, like Ian, you mentioned in some of the Asian countries, people are still transacting or people are still using their flip phones. I think commerce is really interesting in a way that you can always find a way to transact, go around, because here when we are talking about mobile payments, it's always Apple and Google Pay, but Apple Pay, going back to the flip phone scenario, not all of the flip phones have NFC embedded in, right? So they just cannot be easily transacted with NFC type of transaction. So they figured out a way to transact using QR code, because all of the flip phones, they have camera on it, right? Regardless of what type of legacy operating systems that they have, they can always find a creative way to transact. And this is actually the reason why the Chinese, the Asians actually have been able to pull ahead in terms of digital transactions, because they did not have the need to invest into the credit card infrastructure, right? Saving a ton for both merchants and the consumers in terms of the fees and some of the cost infrastructure, and jump ahead to the digital transformation. So I think from our perspective, again, resonating what Osa mentioned, this is essentially helping to build a better connected commerce. And from our experience, this is also taking the checkout to the consumer versus the other way around, right? Because right now it's always so one-sided. It's either you are on the website or you are in store. It's always that you check out at the merchant's checkout, with the limited number of payment options. But I think that is gonna change. That is going to change to a more equally representative way. Consumers and merchants may have the same voice over how the checkout should take place, right? So, 2013, 2014 was also the era when in China, a lot of people were talking about O2O experience, right? So like Osa mentioned, when you walk into the store, that merchant, that business have no idea about whether or not this customer just walked into the store is a customer or is a prospect. So I think when technologies are becoming more connected, the process of becoming a customer, the process of selling to a customer, it's gonna look a lot more seamless. 100% agree on that.
Yeah, the ecosystem's certainly closing in on itself a bit. I mean, just this week, Shopify and YouTube inked that deal where you could connect YouTube to Shopify, and then obviously Instagram. So Meta is kind of upping the checkout experience there across like e-com platforms. So yeah, and then there's, I mean, yeah, there's just a lot to that for sure. So we got about 9 minutes. Two more questions I want to ask you guys, and this is a bit of a matzo ball one, but I did prep you for this. Um, so, just in the past year between Fast and Bolt, there's been, and full transparency, I was a one-time employee over at Bolt. There has been a ton of media around checkout, and a lot of it not necessarily great. So, how do you feel this has impacted perceptions of the need for alternative checkout solutions or add-ons to whether it's on the retail side or whether it's on the e-commerce side? Is it especially when you have a player in the game like Shopify, which is just kind of like the one-stop solution. So yet there's still, there's Stripe, there's PayPal to an extent, there's just a ton of alternative checkout solutions out there. So I guess how has the press of the past year, good, bad, et cetera, how has that impacted what you guys are seeing in terms of perception for alternative checkout solutions?
I can shoot first. So, I mean, definitely we have seen a lot more conversations with our prospects and even with investors about Fast and Checkout, Fast and Bolt, right? Our relevance to them, how will they impact us in terms of both go to market and also, fundraising wise. I want to say that, huge kudos to both of them. Taking on both the consumer side and merchant side, I think is difficult, right? They are bumping up against Shopify Pay, PayPal in a way that there are some established players in the market. We are actually trying to think small, right? So when we provide that alternative payments, it's actually alternative in a way that merchants are not accepting them. This is different from credit card transactions, but they're actually dominant form of payments for a lot of people. If you take, for instance, some of the Asian wallets that we support, they are the 90, they are how 99% of those consumer base out of Asia transact, right? So we actually don't need to educate the consumers. We actually don't need to have them install our app. Actually, we don't have an app to begin with. So I think when it comes to alternative payments, we are really trying to filling the gap. The gap at this moment in the market is that there are no merchant acceptance for all of those alternative payments. We are actually a partner of Shopify. We are partners of a lot of that e-com marketplace, a lot of the POS companies, but this is actually not as high tech, but essentially aggregating and essentially, our whole purpose is just trying to make it super easy for the merchants to adopt those alternative payments. And again, a lot of those alternative payments are nothing new to the consumers, so there's no need for education there.
Wow, that's powerful. I think kind of going back to something Mason mentioned earlier, when I think about Fast and Bolt, the thing I always think about is how to make the process seamless for the consumer and for the merchant. And I think for us at Parrot, just to be transparent, we're a competitor of Bolt and Fast, and so when we talk to customers who are trying to decide, okay, do I go with Bolt or do I go with you? We do have to talk them through, right? Like, hey, why does it matter that Bolt was sued by one of their customers? Why does it matter that Fast just kind of went away? Is that going to happen to us if we choose Parrot as our checkout solution? And so what we always tell merchants is, like, when you're thinking about checkout, don't be focused on one-click checkout as a feature. Don't be focused on the hype of who's raising money or who's not raising money. Think about how do you make checkout more seamless for your consumer, end to end, right? Not just when they're on your website, not just when they're on IG, kind of scrolling through your products. Maybe they're not on either platform. Maybe they're just on their couch watching TV. How do you engage them and get them to buy something from you and transact with you? And I think something Mason said earlier is about taking checkout to the consumer, right? I think a lot of merchants we talk to are thinking about these problems deeply, whether it's because they're calling their prospects on the phone to close them, or they're having to call customers to get a sale done. I think what's really been exciting about, unfortunately, Fast going away and Bolt kind of struggling to deal with some of the issues they're seeing is I think customers, particularly merchants, are starting to ask the question, what would I do, right? If I was in control of a checkout company, how would I make checkout happen? Would I support alternative payment methods? Would I support debit cards and ACH? And that's been exciting because I think merchants are now realizing I don't have to be stuck with any of these players. I can decide as a merchant what I want checkout to look like, and I can let my consumers influence what choices I make on technology, as opposed to being beholden to the credit card processors or the checkout companies who've raised a bunch of money. So I for me, I get excited when I talk about bold and fast because I think it is a really hard problem we're trying to solve. But ultimately, I think these companies losing a bit of their luster has helped us kind of come back to first principles and say, what are we trying to do for merchants and consumers to make their lives better? And if we're not doing that, if it's about VC fundraising and press, then we've already lost the battle because we're no longer talking about what matters.
That's good. Yeah. So final question before we wrap it up is, so if I were to bring you a prospect, sit you down in front of, and I like to focus this probably like a little less on the SMB side, but a little bit more on the mid-tier side. So let's say a company doing in the range $20 million a year and then on. What's one thing in terms of checkout you would advise them to take on ASAP, and what would you tell them can wait?
So, I mean, 20 million is definitely an interesting number. That's the critical mass. A lot of that, players, checkout companies, payments companies are looking out, right? It's really close to get to almost the enterprise level in the eyes of a lot of the payments companies. So I think my suggestion is definitely still focus on the top line. How do you make your customers happy? Like, think about, enabling a checkout when the customer is watching a TV show, like Osa just mentioned, right? So I think definitely anything, all the initiative that can help boost the top line, increase the payment conversion rate, right? Obviously by adding a lot more payment methods, giving the payment option, that choice to the consumer, not, like Osa mentioned, sort of hijacking the checkout process because you are the merchant. You get to control, but think in the shoes of the consumer, add more payment methods so that you can increase a lot more payments conversion, get to the next phase, get to the enterprise level. But I think one of the things that a merchant or a business can also consider in the meantime is 20 million is still quite a lot of number. So there's something that a business actually doesn't need to consider too much when it comes to taking that initiative. Is maybe start negotiating with your platforms about fees. That's non-technical, can be easily achieved. Get the payment fee lower if possible. So yeah, top line, on the sideline, connect with the processor, try to negotiate for a better term for yourself.
That's great. Osa?
Yeah, I think my suggestion would be a bit more low touch, low tech. I'd say if you got 20 million in revenue, you've probably got 100, if not more, VIPs, like people who buy from you very regularly. I'd say go into your database, your email database, or your Shopify, or whatever platform you're using. Go into your CRM, pull out those 100 people, and send them an email. And ideally, get on the phone with them, offer them money, whatever you can. But talk to your best customers and ask them about how they feel about your checkout, how they feel about paying with you. Have they had credit card issues? Do they have payment methods they want to use that they're not being able to use because you haven't thought about it? But I think a lot of merchants would serve themselves, especially once they're at scale, to go back to your best customers and ask them very deep questions around how they feel about your checkout. This might take the form of an NPS survey that you send out. This might be, hiring an intern just to call everyone who's buying from you regularly. But I think once you learn more about how your consumers feel about how they pay with you, you can very, very quickly decide where to start to invest energy over the next 12 months. It might be lowering credit card fees. It might be offering Klarna or some other payment method. But it might be simple things like maybe, just sending people easy links that they can use to check out because they buy the same thing every quarter from you. I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there, but I think it really starts with, again, taking the time to go talk to your best customers about how they feel about paying with your business.
That's great. Thank you. Well, think we're going to wrap it up there. This has been awesome. You guys are two of the most intelligent, insightful people I've been lucky enough to interact with in this space over the past couple of years. So I appreciate you taking the time here. And I hope everyone will come away with some insights out of this. Tell us, just as you sign off, tell us where we can find you guys, obviously the company website, and then if there's anywhere on social people should be following you, let me know. Mason, you want to
go? Sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Just signing off. Just tell us where people can find you, your website, and any social links that people should be following.
Yeah, I think website Pockyt.io. I can also be found obviously on LinkedIn, Mason Lin. Love to stay in touch. Really enjoyed the conversation. Great, having this session with Osa. Really learned a lot of great insights. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was great to be here with you, Ian, and Mason as well. I love speaking with y'all. If you want to find out more about us, or you want to learn more about payment processing or SMS, please go to getparrot.com. It's GET Parrot.com, and I got a lot of resources there. And if you're looking to improve your checkout, please get in touch with us there as well.
Cool. Thanks again. And to everyone listening, this will be posted on banknotes.co over the next couple of days. And then subscribe to our email newsletter over on the website as well. We'll be posting future updates about future webinars and content. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you.
Bye.